All the topics that we have covered so far are a part of Laravel learning core concepts. Now the section that we are about to start is called cache. And believe me, there is a lot of things to talk about cache. First of all, like what the cache is, why do we really need that cache? Then we have to talk about how we can store elements to the cache, how we can pull the elements, and what are the different drivers available to us for the cache, and lots of stuff. Also, there is one more important stuff in the cache, which is the cache locking. How does the locks works? We will talk about on all of these systems or functionalities one by one in this section. So let's see what the cache is and why do we really need the cache. So the cache is basically used to if you have something in the database that requires a lot of computation, and on every request it is calculating some sort of information, or it is gathering some sort of information. Just for an example, if you are on the admin side and you have to fetch the user information all the time from the database, and by fetching all the time the database the information from the database, sending requests to the database, that might take some time, and sometimes this can go, maybe you might see a drastic change in the web application. Maybe the application goes slow because of too many concurrent database queries and stuff like that. Now, in order to overcome this problem, and there could be a lot of other examples, but for this relevant problem and all other problems, we need to use cache. So what the cache will do is basically the cache will get the data only once from the database, and when again we are about to query the database, the cache data will be returned unless we destroy the cache. So this is one major power of cache. So you don't need to really worry about your computed or highly complex queries from the database every time. You can just put those in the cache, and then you can also and a part of that, you can also store some variables in the cache as well, depending upon, for an instance, let's say the pop-up you want to display on the screen, and when the user completes that pop-up or closes that pop-up, you want not to display it again for that specific user. Here the cache plays a very important role as well. Now the thing is to remember, like, there is a difference between cache and sessions. The sessions are stored on the server, whereas the caches are stored on your local browser. So if you delete the cache from your local browser, the information will be deleted, and you will see might the pop-up again, or the database query will run again only once before it caches the data again. Now let's talk about what are the drivers available to us in the cache. So I am into the cache.php file, which is basically inside the config directory. So inside the config directory we have a cache.php. By default, the driver that we are using is the file, whereas you can see below the supported drivers are as follows. So you can use array, database, file, memcached, redis, dynamodb, octane, and null as well. So by default the Laravel comes with the file driver. The reason is that the files are very light to acquire the data, but for the larger computed properties or the computational features, you might consider the database driver or the memcached or the redis driver. So these are the most powerful drivers when it comes to the very large applications. For the small applications or for the small features, you really don't need the database drivers or other stuff. Now how we can change the driver, first of all, let's see. So this is basically getting the value from the cache from the env drivers or env file. If we copy this and go into the env, you will see that we have the cache environment variable defined here. So everything that you want to change, if you want to use the database, you only need to change it in the env file. You really don't need to just touch this cache, the core file, because everything is being maintained by the environment variables. Now I have created a brand new controller, which is the cache controller, and I have created a empty function which is basically doing nothing. If I reload, so I see nothing on the page. Now let's see, and let's try to put our first item into the cache, how we actually store the items in the cache. So in order to store the items or the values in the cache, we have to use the cache facade. Alright, and then with the help of cache facade, we have lot of options or methods available. Let's see the first how we can actually put the values in the cache. So I have to use the cache facade. So if I type cache, and you will see illuminate support facade. So this is basically the cache facade, and we have bunch of options or the supported methods available. For now, let's see how we can actually add the value into the cache. So for that, we are going to use the put method. The put method is used to basically put the values or information into the cache. The put method, the first object of the first parameter is basically called the key. The key is basically used to actually basically when we store the value in the cache, we need to define some kind of identifier. The key is basically the identifier, and then the value, and then the time as well. So let's say the first identifier I am going to use is basically user underscore email for an instance, and then this is the key. Now the second thing, you can see that the key can also be an array or a string. Here you can define the function definition. It is saying that the key could be array or the string. The value could be mixed. So the mix means like it could be string, it could be array, it could be object as well. So we are going to obviously deal with the strings here. So I will type in my own personal email, which is basically this one. Now the third parameter is basically time to live. For how long the cache you want to basically it should exist in the browser. Either it is indefinite, it is for 1 day, it is for seconds, or it is forever. If you leave that with null value, so this will be considered as indefinite time. So indefinite time means basically when the cache will automatically destroy. You can also pass the time specific values to this third parameter. And how to basically use or put this data, the timestamps, either you can calculate by using the time method. You can pass it to the seconds. For example, let's say 1 minute has 60 seconds, you can pass in the 60 seconds. But you can also pass in the date time instance as well. You can also play around with the now and add days to it. So for example, I want to add days, and the days would be 5, just for an example. You can also play around with these possibilities as well. So the seconds can also be passed, and then the date instance can also be passed to this third parameter. Now if I want to get the value from the cache, what I can do is basically I can use the cache and a get method. Now inside the get method, I have to pass the array, so basically the key, and then I can also define the default value as well. For example, let's say I want to get the value of this user email, and right now I want to just echo it. So if I echo the value and if I reload, you see I have got the email back from the cache. But if an instance I enter another key that is not existing, so I will get basically nothing. But I can also provide a default value to this cache object as well. So if that does not exist, the key, we can also define the default value. So the default value could be, let's say, info@mail.com. and now if I try to reload the page, you will see that I have got the default value. Now the reason is that because this is not existed. So now if I try to do this one more time and cache, if I try to echo this value, and let me pause this. Now if I reload, I will still get nothing. The reason is that because that default value is not stored in the cache at the moment. You have to keep this thing in mind. Like when you give the default value is only used when the key does not exist. When the key exists, the value will be returned. Otherwise the default value will never be stored into the database. Alright, so now we have seen how we can actually store the values into the cache and get the values from the cache. Now there is a lot of more things to talk about. That's about it for this one, and I will see you in the upcoming videos.